So, welcome all to another interesting episode of Toast Talk 95, the podcast where we speak to fellow Toastmasters within District 95. And District 95 contains not one, but 5 countries: Denmark, Norway, Germany, Sweden, and Iceland, who is soon to start their first club ever. So, not just volcanoes erupting over there, but also some clubs emerging. I'm Sofia Haarderup. I'm Division B Director, and that is Division B is including clubs in Norway and parts of Sweden. The why behind this episode is simple. I often listen to the fabulous Toastmaster podcast and have been doing so for many years. However, I have discovered that very few know about this hidden gem. So therefore, I invited one of the hosts to this session to talk to us today. He comes from a district very, very far away, 8 hours to be exact. Let me introduce Greg Gazin, a proud and passionate Toastmasters of 22 years, a 6-time distinguished Toastmaster and former district director. Outside the world of speeches and evaluation, Greg is known as the Gadget Guy, or Gadget Greg. He's a lifestyle columnist, a dynamic speaker, facilitator, blogger, and author of the book Corey Outsmarts the Butterflies. Greg has been behind the mic for years, producing the award-winning Toastmasters podcast and also the official Toastmaster International podcast. Now, that is quite an introduction, so please, Greg, the stage is yours. I believe that you reside in Edmonton, Canada, and apparently you receive the most amount of sunlight over there. So have you seen any sunshine today?
Well, first of all, I guess it's good morning here. It's good morning. It's good evening, I guess, for you, depending on where you are. And thank you so much for having me. Yes, I found that was quite an interesting discussion that we had previously. The first thing you mentioned to me was the amount of sunlight. It's interesting. Yes, we do have a lot of sunlight. And in fact, in June, it doesn't get dark until 11 p.m. And when I remember when I was younger, I don't know if for those of you who are a little older in the tooth, remember the drive-in movie theaters. And of course, the movie theaters typically they were outside and they would start once the sun set. So of course, you go on a Friday night, the movies wouldn't start until probably about 11 p.m. So we do get a lot of sunlight. Of course, conversely, in the wintertime, we have very, very short days. And the other thing, of course, is where we are is like in Sweden, it gets very cold. And it's not uncommon in February for the Celsius and the Fahrenheit temperature gauges to read the same right up at the bottom of the thermometer at -40 Celsius.
That's incredible. Yeah. Quite a variation in times of
It is.
terms of temperature. Okay. You know, everyone has their unique story on how they ended up in Toastmasters. So would you care to tell us a little bit about how you ended up in Toastmaster and what kept you member for so long?
Well, it's interesting how Toastmasters really started twice for me. And it was the first time I had taken a public speaking course at the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology. And the individual there who was the professor or the teacher, his name was Mr. Peter Kossowin. He is still a Toastmaster. He's 95. He's been a Toastmaster for 55 years currently. And he also has the record for starting the most amount of clubs, which is about 172, which he has started over the years. I took the course. He had recommended that we go to Toastmasters. Now, I know in our clubs, we do our best to make sure that we welcome guests and we make sure, because some people are very nervous and very shy, which I was. And sadly, when I got to that particular meeting, it was in the olden days before there was a lot of technology available. I was there sitting in the back and they were trying to figure out, okay, who's going to speak next? And the overhead projector wasn't working. And I felt that how am I going to put this? I felt neglected. So I actually left and I didn't come back for about 18 years until a friend of mine had said, oh, Greg, let's go for coffee. And after we went for coffee, he decided to drag me to a Toastmasters meeting. And I said, no, I've been there already. I don't really want to go. But he dragged me to this meeting. The club was called New Entrepreneurs, and most of the members there were entrepreneurs or becoming entrepreneurs or wanting to be an entrepreneur. And the night I had 90 minutes of fascination. I saw speeches. I was even given an opportunity to do a table topic, which I don't remember what the subject was, and I don't remember what the question was. But what I do remember was that when the stopwatch was, when I ended, I didn't quite make 12 seconds, and that was it. I was devastated. I wasn't coming back, and that's it. But obviously, I came back, and it has done absolute wonders for me. In fact, I wouldn't be here doing this podcast. I wouldn't be doing a lot of things that I have been doing if it wasn't for Toastmasters.
Yeah, that's so fascinating to hear. And that just shows that one meeting could be very different from another. So I would also, for those who maybe been to a club meeting where it hasn't clicked, don't give up, try another club. It's happened to me as well. There have been clubs where I haven't maybe felt that welcome, but I haven't given up. So, and now I'm found those clubs that I feel very at ease with.
Yeah. In hindsight, it wasn't that they were not welcoming. They were just so wrapped up in getting the meeting started that they didn't realize I was in the back. And I was very fearful at that time. I mean, I was shaking. And then that's when I realized, okay, here's my opportunity. I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
But with the other club, what happened was I got a call afterwards saying, hey, Greg, we understand what happened. It's natural. These things do happen. And, Toastmasters is a good place for you. And when I froze up and I wasn't able to really get out the words I wanted to say, they were supportive. They did not make fun of me. I didn't feel intimidated. I didn't feel that it was a bad environment. So I came back, and that's one of the beauties of having really good club officer training. I mean, that's one thing that when I delivered training, I insisted upon as a sergeant at arms. You need to be aware and try to read the people to say, hey, this person looks like they're a little bit shy. So anyway, I digress.
So do you think if you would have told that young Greg what you have become today, would he have believed you? If you would have said, I will be doing podcasting in so many years.
In the moment, no, but as a technology individual, I always love audio. Even as a child or as a young person, I'm an audiophile. I used to collect records and vinyl. And of course, now we don't have anything physical much anymore. We have MP3s, but I always loved the sound of audio. And so, of course, the transition, being able to speak in Toastmasters, being able to deliver the verbal being able to deliver verbal communication, it just makes sense that it's a nice blend for podcasting.
Okay, thank you so much. And I was also reading that, as I said in the introduction, that you have 6 DTMs. Most of us are struggling to complete our first one. How have you managed to do that?
Well, it's kind of funny because Mr. Peter Koswin had said, always never give a free speech, always make sure you get credit. Of course, now sometimes I get paid for it, which is good too. But what I found was anytime I was doing anything, I always carried a manual with me. And when I took on the role as area governor, now they called area director, I visited a number of clubs. And again, at that time, they were paper manuals. Now Pathways is, of course, a different program. I always made sure that I had an opportunity to give a presentation. I was always prepared with a back pocket speech, one that I just had ready to go just to be on the safe side. And sometimes it was either a humorous speech, or in my case, there's always some new gadgets and a new piece of technology coming out. So I could start talking about that. What I found over time is, of course, all of a sudden now all of us, your manuals are all filled up. In addition, with leadership, taking on the role of area, division, and then, of course, now you have the new, public relations. And I believe you have a club growth director, club quality director, and district director. So each time you take on those roles, that's another checkbox for the next DTM in terms of your leadership. And then, of course, helping to start new clubs. Peter Koswin is also now a personal friend of mine. So whenever there was a demo meeting happening, he would call me up and say, Greg, we're doing a demo meeting. Can you come along and help us out? So all of a sudden, those leadership boxes just become check boxes. And one of the projects in the legacy program, which I believe is similar to the DTM project in Pathways, I created the podcast. that was one of my, back then it was called the High Performance Leadership Project. Now I believe it's called the DTM Project.
Yeah.
And I thought, why not create a podcast? Again, this was 18 years ago, I know. And back then, the big question was, what's a podcast?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, how was that received from the district when you came up with that suggestion?
Well, I decided I was going to start right at the top. So my first interview was the district governor. Of course, you call her district director now. And that was her first question. I said, Mona, her name was Mona Cooley, wonderful lady. In fact, I remember saying to her, I would like to do a podcast. She says, sure, great. What's a podcast? She had an opportunity to talk about the district. She talked about leadership and thought it was just a great medium for it. Yeah. I forgot what the original question was.
Yeah, well, actually, maybe we can just build on that. You mentioned that you were district governor and director as it is today, and also you have all these other district roles. What's your takeaway from that time? And I'm thinking there are probably many that maybe don't want to venture outside the club zone, but do you have any advice for those that want to maybe thinking about applying for becoming an area or district director?
It's a scary leap, especially for someone like myself, I've been self-employed pretty much most of my life. I think the key there is keeping your eyes and ears open to possibilities. And that doesn't really start with you. It starts with the leaders that are within the club, or the leaders that put on the club officer training, the area and division and the other directors, of showing people what's possible, not just talking about, oh, you could become an area director. You can get credit towards your DTM, your Distinguished Toastmaster. But no, saying things like taking on these leadership roles can help you in your job, can help you in your business, can help you to do job interviews, and go talk a little bit more about the benefits as opposed to just the list of jobs that need to be done. What happened to me was very funny. I was asked to I was originally at the club. I was always typically the first one there and the first one to leave. Sorry, the first one to get there and the last one to leave.
Yeah.
Because I always enjoyed talking to the people who were there. And I was approached saying, you come in early, Greg, and you stay late. How would you like to be the sergeant at arms? And I said, I don't know. I've never been one before. So they explained what the role was. I took that on. And then the next role was the vice president of education. I had the gentleman who's going to be president of our club. He came up to me and he says, Greg, he said, I want to be president next year. I want you to be my right hand. Would you be interested? So having somebody take you under their wing. Area was another interesting. After our meetings, we would typically go for coffee at a coffee shop somewhere. And the gentleman, there was just two of us left at the end of the evening. And the other gentleman, Bill McKenzie, he was in fact a division governor. Now again, division director. And I innocently asked him, what's an area governor?
Oh.
So all of a sudden this was the end of August. It was already 2 months into the term. And 2 weeks later, I became an area governor, area director. I find for me is take an opportunity if you're a little bit, perhaps if you're shy of maybe taking it on or you don't feel that you can, because shadow the person who's doing it. Talk to people who are in the roles right now and see what they're doing. Now, there's a lot of people that are going to say, it's a lot of time. It's a lot of time, but everything takes time.
Yeah.
It's an investment in your time. And when you think that originally I was a gadget guy who sat behind the keyboard, and that's what I probably would have been continuing to do, Toastmasters has helped me get out from behind that keyboard and take on opportunities. I spent a lot of my years writing. And of course, with newspapers drying up, there's a lot more content on the internet. The next shift over was to go out and talk about gadgets and technology. And that would not have been possible if it wasn't for Toastmasters. Do your research, talk to people that are there, and try to look at what the benefits are for you, not just now, but down the road.
Yeah. And also, I think one of the positive things with past directors is that they're there to support you. Whereas maybe if you're in a company, the past director will probably disappear into another employment, but the past director is usually there to help you and to have a good transfer.
They're all willing to help. And it's amazing. All you have to do is ask the question. And every Toastmaster, when you say, can I get some help? Now, some people are afraid of showing their vulnerability. Some people are afraid of showing their weakness. But I find if I put it out there, when I became area director 2 months into the role, again, the term had already started. I remember having my, area council meeting. And the first thing I said to the presidents who were there, I said, okay, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I just became your area leader last week. I have no idea what I'm doing. Of course, one president piped up and said, we don't either. I think we're going to get along just fine. So
excellent. Yeah. Okay. So you had a lot of psychological safety there, sounds like.
Yes.
Okay. So let's move on to this fabulous podcast of yours that you're co-hosting with Ryan Levesque. Would you care to tell us on what you do in these podcasts?
Okay, wonderful. It's a good question because we do often get emails and phone calls and requests to be on the podcast. So the raison d'etre for the Toastmasters podcast is to amplify the words and the pictures that are in the magazine. So literally 99%, 98% of the podcasts that we do originally started from a story or an article in the magazine. So we could be interviewing someone who wrote an article. It could be someone who was featured in an article. They could be mentioned in it. Perhaps they're a subject matter expert in their field. And that's what we use for the base. We put out 2 episodes a month. We try to line them up with the articles whenever we can, but sometimes the articles are written in advance. Sometimes getting a hold of people might be a little bit of a challenge, but we try as close as we can to be able to do that. So that's really the raison d'etre to it. So quite often you see an article, it has a limited number of words. And when you read the article, there might be some questions you want to ask, or maybe just go a little bit further in depth. And the podcast gives you the opportunity to do that. One of the questions I get is, which is my favorite episode? And I don't really necessarily have a favorite, but one of them that sticks in my mind is we interviewed a lady named Sarah Safari. And I believe it was in 2014 that she was climbing up Mount Everest when the earthquake hit. And she was literally dangling for her life. And she is a Toastmaster. And I remember her recounting her story. So imagine you read the article. The article really impacted me. The pictures were fantastic. It was a cover story. But then listening to her recount her story, it was just giving me shivers. And it's doing that now as I rethink. So that's the power of using a podcast to amplify existing content. What else can I tell you about it? So we do it twice a month. Every year we always interview the president, the incoming international president. So we interviewed Ratty Spear just recently. A couple of days ago, I'm not sure when this is airing, but a few days this week, we released the podcast with the current world champion of public speaking, Luisa Montalvo. We'll have in January the new accredited speakers coming up. So we always have those as regular features.
Oh, so much to listen to.
Yeah, there are over 250 episodes, and you can find the Toastmasters podcast at toastmasterspodcast.com. All the episodes there. They're also often embedded in the articles that are put out, and you can also get it on Apple and Spotify, but I think just the last probably about 50 episodes.
And that's excellent also because before this episode, I asked around a bit also how many reads the Toastmaster magazine. And since it went online, which was maybe some time ago, not that many are reading it because they don't like to, go online and print it or download it, whatever. They prefer to have the paper version. But now we can get the audio version by listening to your podcast, and we get a selected interview from the magazine. So I think it's excellent.
What we try to do is we hope that people will listen to the podcast and go to the magazine, and we'll also hope that the vice versa as well. I also have a second podcast that I do. As I mentioned earlier, it was my high performance leadership project, or my DTM project, back in 2006, and it's called Toastcaster. And originally it was created for our district, and I was a division director at the time, and then I also became the public relations manager. So I continued that for a little while. At the time, the district didn't want to continue it, so I repurposed it as I call it Toastcaster Communication Leadership and Learning Lab. And so it's more general, not specifically Toastmaster related, but I quite often will interview Toastmasters, or I'll get people interested in Toastmasters. So I'll interview someone perhaps that wrote a book. I tell them a little bit more about Toastmasters. They go, oh, this is great. I will check it out. So we try to get the traffic going multiple ways. And there are about 170 or 180 episodes. I try to do one a month, but of course the Toastmasters podcast keeps me really busy. And in fact, next week, I will be interviewing Daniel Rex, the CEO of Toastmasters International, for a couple of upcoming podcasts related to the Toastmasters 100th anniversary. And I'm so excited to be able to have an opportunity to speak with him.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, it's coming up in just a few days, depending on when this will air. So, and also, you have been credited by Toastmasters also for introducing technology in an easy, understandable way to Toastmasters. You received, was it 2009? You received this citation, Toastmaster International Presidential Citation, which I believe is given by the international president. I'm not sure who was the international president at that year, but that's quite a prestigious recognition for your important work in this field.
Well, thank you very much for that. It was 2009. It was Distinguished Toastmaster Janet Barnhill. She was the international president at the time, and it was for the use of technology to benefit the Toastmasters community. It was a combination of a couple of things. One was the podcast, because when I had first started the podcast, there were no other Toastmasters there was no other official Toastmasters podcast. The current official Toastmasters podcast started in 2000, and I think it was 2009 or 2010, but was originally, Bo Bennett and Ryan Levesque had originally created a podcast for Toastmasters, I think around 2007 or 2008. The second thing that I had done with respect to technology was, as a public relations manager, I had a project where my goal was to have every single club in our district have a website or a free Toast host site, because there were a lot of clubs that did not have any site at all. There was no way to get information. And of course, we don't have the technology that we have today. So that was my goal, to be able to do that. So I created a contest, and it was, now I'm trying to remember. I can't remember the name of it. It was so long ago. I'm sorry. That's right. It was called Weave Your Way to the Web. That's what the program was called. So again, the whole idea. So what I also did is I went out, again, being well-versed in technology. I went out to some companies. I got some prizes. I got like a digital video camera. I had another individual company that was willing to produce a little promotional DVD and a promotional video, because back then to produce a professional promotional 3-minute video would cost about $2,000 or $3,000. So I went out and got prizes, and then I solicited individuals from the new media industry, technology industry, to do an evaluation. So we had over 250 clubs in our district at the time, and we got 78 that participated. Either they created new websites, they updated their existing websites, or free Toast host sites. So it was actually quite a success. And then I was asked at a regional conference to share what I did with the other districts that were in my region, which we did, and three other districts decided to take that project on. So it was a lot of fun. It was very valuable, and again, it helped kickstart, because again, some clubs, the only thing they used was email, and pretty much that was it. So it was a combination of those things, and the recognition was really nice. It was pretty exciting, but I think the fact, knowing that you're able to use technology for value. I mean, a lot of people complain today about social media, but there is still a lot of value in technology if you use it right.
Yes, we just need to know how to use it. That's the thing.
And I'm still learning. There's always new stuff coming out every day. Like AI is now artificial intelligence. That's the new buzz. We'll have to see where that goes.
Yeah, we'll see. And if that's not enough, you also written a book for a children's book called Corey Outsmarts the Butterflies. And I must admit that this book I wished I had when I was young, when I was shy and, fearful of standing in front of the class. So was this something that you experienced yourself, or how did this topic come about? What made you write this
It
book?
it's funny because when you said you wish you had it back then, I said to myself, me too.
Mm.
Well, how it came about was for a few years, for fellow Toastmaster Kevin Oxner and I would do presentations at the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology. We would go in twice a year at the beginning of each term, and we would do a public speaking session and communication session for the entrepreneur students because they're required to do a presentation at the end of the session. Now, my friend Kevin had already written a book called Diamonds and Silver. And what had happened was I had suggested to him that we do a prequel or a sequel to his book. So I used the name of one of the characters. But as it turned out, so I said to him, I said, here's the outline, here's the characters. He said, well, why don't you just go and write it yourself? So the word smart, some people know the SMART acronym as specific, measurable, attainable, et cetera. Well, this one's different. This one relates to different elements of public speaking. And I won't give them away right now, but again, because right now I can't remember them.
We'll have to look it up.
So yeah, it's funny because I actually have a book on the other side there. I was actually going to have it in front of me, but again, the S, the M, the A, the R, the T. So in essence, what it is, it's a book about a little boy who's afraid to do his show and tell. I think some places call it show and share. And he meets an older boy that guides him through it. And that's really the whole idea behind the book. It's a short book. It's only about 40 pages. It does have some illustrations in it. It's a primer it's a really good primer for public speaking. And in fact, I have more adults buy it for themselves than they do for their kids.
So interesting. Yeah. Yeah, you have a broad audience, I can imagine.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, if there are any listeners out there, I can send you a link. If someone wants a free copy of it, I'm happy to give it away to anybody that's listening to this podcast episode. How's that?
Thank you so much. It's very generous of you. Also, another question I always interested in hearing of Toastmaster members is, during the years, we have held so many speeches, and especially you who have done 60 TMs. Do you have a favorite speech that you hold a little more dear than others? Can you think of any? I'm not sure whether you've competed, and could it be a speech you competed with, or?
Yeah, I'll mention two if that's okay. And one of them, I think one of them was probably in the legacy program. There is a project on inspiring your audience. And one of the feedback from my mentor was I was always doing speeches that are either technology related or humor related. Because I would get nervous, I would do humor. I would do things that are kind of funny. And he had said to me, he says, Greg, he said, you really need to get out of your comfort zone. And I said, well, I don't know what to talk about. He said, because he had known my dad. My dad had had a stroke. And I can't remember at that point whether my dad passed away somewhere in that time period. He said, why don't you talk about your dad? And I said, I can't do that. I says, you've told me so many stories about your dad. Why don't you share some stories about dad? So I did. I put together a 5 to 7 minute speech and I started talking about my dad. And I remember while I was delivering the speech, there were two ladies that were sitting fairly close in front of me because we were in a summer location at the time, which was a little bit more compressed than a boardroom that we were normally in. And they were crying and they had tears pouring down. And all of a sudden, even myself, I just lost it. And it was at that moment I had this epiphany. Well, not at that moment. I think it was afterwards, because in the time I was just trying to hold it together to try to get through the speech. But it was after that speech and then the evaluation from my evaluator that I realized the impact of words and the impact that you could have on an individual. When we talk about inspiring, when we talk about not necessarily convincing people, but encouraging people to do things, or just getting buy-in on something, or sharing a personal story. I never realized at that point, because again, everything I did before was either funny or gadget related. And I didn't realize that. And that really, really helped me on my leadership path all the way up to being the district governor, now district director, because there are times that you're sharing. And I had people come up to me and said, I became an area governor because of what you did. I have to admit, it wasn't necessarily that easy. There were days it was like, I don't know if I can do this. And that's also how your mentors come into play, which I could not have really gotten through all of this really without them. The second speech is a humorous speech. And after I had been on the district team for a number of years, my club president came up to me and says, Greg, you got to compete. You got to get into the speech competition, and sort of almost shamed me into doing it. And again, because I love gadgets and technology, I did a speech called Much Ado. Was it? No, I think it was called Much Ado. Much Ado About Gadgets. And it was the trials and tribulations of an individual trying to buy a computer or buy some gadgets and technology. And of course, it has a sort of a Shakespeare twist in it. I came in third in my district of 900 people. So I was actually pretty happy that I didn't win. But that one was that was probably one of the most memorable ones as well. And again, it evolved. And interestingly enough, I had met a number of people in my journey, on the district journey, and I had actually gone to a few people outside of my district for feedback and guidance on my speech. So that's another benefit of getting outside the club. So those are the two ones that are the most memorable for me.
Would any of those be recorded? Just thinking if anyone wants to listen to. Yes,
actually, the Much Ado About Gadgets is on YouTube.
Okay.
In fact, the contest speech is there. The final one is there. So again, if you want, I can send you can put a link in the show notes. It was recorded very far away on a very old camera, VHS camera, so it's not the greatest of quality. But I think you'll enjoy it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so we don't have that much time left, but I also tend to ask a few short questions at the end, where you shouldn't think too much, but just say one of the two. So I'll just give you 3 quick questions, if that's okay.
Whatever works. It's all good.
So what do you prefer, prepared or unprepared speeches?
It probably depends on the context, but I think prepared. I'm a person who likes to be prepared. I won't say 100% prepared, maybe 80% prepared, because sometimes you want to bring something in that you gather in the audience.
Okay, thank you. And having 2 podcasts, it might be a tricky one, but Toastcaster or the International Toastmaster podcast?
Oh, again, you give me questions where I have to pick, right? It's like picking your favorite child. It's hard to do that. Toastcaster, obviously I have a little bit more freedom with the Toastcaster, but I think the Toastmasters podcast, because I feel that it's really valuable to be able to take what you have in the magazine and amplify it. And I get to talk to some incredible people around the world. In fact, if you listen to some of the episodes, you'll realize that someone is being interviewed for something, but they may have a personal backstory that is just absolutely incredible. So definitely the Toastmasters podcast. Yeah.
And last question has to do with the Canadian most popular sport, ice hockey. So Wayne Gretzky or the Swedish star Börje Salming, the favorite player?
That's not really a fair question, because I do love Börje Salming. I remember his days in Toronto, but I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, and Wayne Gretzky played here for so many years. In fact, his wedding was at a church that was just a few blocks from where I live. So
that's fair.
I hope that doesn't make me too many enemies in Europe. So.
No, you're quite all right there. Okay, so do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up here? Something that you want to share with the audience?
Well, I think if it comes to Toastmasters, is I would say you need to put a little bit of work into it. What you put in, you'll get out from it. When I first joined Toastmasters, it was for communication. It was mostly for communication. Then leadership was something that was really never on my radar. And now one of the big things is the ability to give back and take an opportunity to meet. I meet a lot of people in the process, but it only happens if you go outside of your club. With respect to podcasting, there's a Toastmasters Pathways Level 4 elective. I would encourage everyone to give it a try. You can record something on your phone. You don't even have to publish it, but just give it a try. Maybe just record your speeches. There are tools online that will allow you to record your speech and play it back just to listen to it. It's something that you might want to try. And the other thing you'll find is I had been recording my speeches since day one on the little tiny pocket tape recorder. And when I can, of course, those are long gone now. But often what will happen is I will go back and listen to older speeches because, first of all, I don't remember what I said way back when, so at least I have it recorded. But you'll see where you were and where you are. And also it'll give you an opportunity to say, you know what, speech. I don't know about you, but we're Toastmasters. We're always constantly evaluating ourselves. Go ahead and try it. Take an older speech, bring it back to life. So those are my tips. And I just want to thank you for reaching out. It was really fantastic to hear from you. It's always good to get feedback. Sometimes I'll get comments from people on the podcast, but not often enough will people reach out and use verbal communication to share what they thought and what they felt. And also thank you so much for being an advocate of the podcast and getting more people to know about it. Sometimes it is a closely held secret, which it really shouldn't be.
Yes, for sure. And for all the listeners out there, I mean, maybe I'm not sure whether on your way home, you may be doing house chores. I really recommend you listening to one of the episodes. There's everything, captivating stories. So you don't have any good excuse for not listening in. So, and also the website is toastmasterspodcast.com, right? And also other ways you could go.
That's correct. Yes.
.org. And as you mentioned, we will put in the show notes on how to get in contact with you as well. Wonderful. Okay, so thank you so much. I had a wonderful time talking to you, and we're looking forward to the next episodes coming up.
That sounds great, and I look forward to listening to some of your episodes as well. You seem to have some pretty interesting people in your district, and again, I'd love to meet them.
Thank you. We haven't really reached that many episodes yet, but we'll get there.
You're getting there. It's a start. Again, you have to start somewhere. If you listen to some of my earlier recordings, I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm always trying to find ways of improving.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you so much, and have a great remainder of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you.